Truistery Vibes warmly welcomes all our beloved listeners. We're so glad to see you again in our familiar time slot.
Today,
Truistery Vibes brings you a brand new story, one that we hope will touch your heart and stay with you. As you listen, feel free to leave a comment sharing the quote or moment that left the deepest impression on you. Wishing you a wonderful and meaningful listening experience. Skylar Dean's first morning in Capitol Hill began, as it so often had, with a muted tension that rippled through the sprawling craftsman-style home she shared with her husband's family. The dawn light filtered through gauzy curtains into the powder blue bedroom she'd been assigned when she married Logan Reeve just 2 years earlier.
outside.
Her husband's teenage nephew dropped a football into the front yard. Inside, Skylar performed her daily ritual of steeling herself for another day under the roof of a household that made her feel unwelcome. Even before she opened her eyes, Skylar's ears were attuned to the familiar sound of raised voices coming from the kitchen. She rose quietly, slipping on a soft gray robe, and padded down the hallway. The walls were lined with framed photos, smiling graduates at the University of Washington, a bronze Go Hawks banner over the fireplace, the Reeve family standing proudly on their front porch. Skylar's own wedding photo, taken in the summer sunlight of Discovery Park, still hung in the entryway. But the smiles in those pictures felt like relics of a more forgiving era. She reached the kitchen doorway just in time to see Bianca Reeve's silhouette, backlit by the warm glow of a pendant lamp, brandishing a spatula like an exclamation point.
Bianca.
Logan's elder sister by 4 years, towered over Skylar by virtue of both height and sheer force of personality. Tight curls of auburn hair crowned her head, and her expression was icy. Logan's mother, Margaret, seeped with anxiety beside her eldest daughter. "You burned the toast again, Sky," Bianca barked, voice sharp enough to crack glass. "I swear, you only do it to sabotage my breakfast." Skylar felt her stomach clench, even though she'd simply set the timer and stepped away. "I'm sorry," she murmured, lifting the toaster slot to reveal a thin wedge of charcoal. "I'll make another." Bianca seized that moment to jab. "No need. I've got it under control, as usual." She flicked Skylar's arm in a gesture so light it wouldn't bruise, yet every woman in that room understood exactly how it would register, a public reminder of Skylar's supposed incompetence. "Could we have a bit more peace?" Margaret interjected, voice trembling. "It's early." "Peace." Bianca laughed as she stacked bread slices in the toaster. "She's been living here 16 months and hasn't learned." 16 months, Skylar corrected softly. "Not 6. Bianca whirled on her, fury igniting her green eyes. "You're counting the days now? Fantastic." She turned back to the toaster. It snapped down with a hollow click. "Honestly, Logan shouldn't have brought you back after all that drama with your parents. But here we are." Margaret covered her face with both hands and sighed. Skylar took her cue, stepping into the adjoining pantry. She closed the door behind her, drawing in a shaky breath and pressing her forehead to the cool wood panel. She could feel Bianca's gaze through the thin door, hot and accusing. Moments later, Logan appeared at the pantry entrance. He reached for her hand. She let him pull her back into their private world. "I'm sorry," he whispered, voice low. "She's having a bad morning." Skylar managed a tired smile. "It's not your fault." "I hate how she treats you," he said, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "I've asked her to knock it off, but it never sticks." Skylar nodded. After 16 months of marriage, she knew how the family dynamics worked. Bianca had been Logan's golden daughter, valedictorian, soccer star, darling of PDA bake sales, while Skylar, an only child from Spokane, had always been seen as an outsider. Her own parents, after a messy divorce, had remarried quickly. The whirlwind had left Skylar cautious about commitment. It had been Logan's steadfast devotion that finally convinced her to trust. But now, trust felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. After breakfast, prepared by Logan before Bianca could reclaim the cookware, Skylar slipped out the back door into the narrow alley behind the house. She walked 2 blocks to the bus stop on Broadway. letting the cool spring air clear her head. The city was waking, coffee shops opening, joggers weaving through cherry blossoms, the distant hum of ferry horns on Elliott Bay. Here, she could be just another commuter, the past hour's humiliation dissolving amid the tide of urban life. But when the reminders came, the snippets of Bianca's voice, Logan's apologetic look, she realized she couldn't continue like this. By the time she reached the downtown Sound Transit station, she'd made a decision. That afternoon, she returned with 2 suitcases. Logan met her at the front door, surprise and guilt warring on his face. "Sky, where are you going?" She lifted her chin. "I've found a small studio up in Fremont. It's not far, just enough space for the 2 of us. I can't stay here." Logan's eyes widened. He glanced past her to the Reeve clan in the living room, Margaret curled in an armchair, worried. Bianca frozen mid-sentence, phone in hand. Logan's father, Richard, adjusting his cufflinks by the window. "You're going to move out?" "Yes," Skylar said, voice steady. "I love you, Logan, but I can't keep subjecting myself to this." She gestured vaguely toward the house, the family, the unspoken pressure that had built up around her. "I need to live somewhere I feel safe, where I can actually breathe." Logan took a step forward, indecision clearing his features. "Sky, I'll talk to them." "Please stay." She held his gaze. "I'm not leaving you. We'll be together. But I need my own 4 walls where no one criticizes every burnt piece of toast." Silence fell, heavy as rain clouds. Finally, Logan exhaled, nodding once. "Okay." That evening, Logan quietly packed his work clothes, scripts for his freelance editing job, and his guitar, his sanctuary after long days of code review. Skylar moved her clothes, her few treasured books, and her grandmother's china teacup into the back of Logan's hatchback. No drama, no shouting matches, just a quiet acknowledgement that life was shifting, irrevocably. As the Reeve family watched from the curb, Logan slid into the driver's seat, Skylar beside him. Bianca approached, arms crossed, and Logan rolled down the window. "Good luck," Bianca said, in a tone that sounded surprisingly sincere. "I guess we'll see you at Thanksgiving." Skylar gave a small wave. "See you then." Bianca nodded once, and turned to walk back inside. Richard Reeve opened his mouth, as if to speak, then thought better of it. Instead, he patted Logan on the shoulder. Margaret blew Skylar a kiss. Logan closed the door. "You okay?" he asked, breathing in the first deep lungful of freedom Skylar had felt in months. She reached across and took his hand. "Better than I have in a long time." He pressed the pedal, and together they pulled away, leaving the big blue house of Capitol Hill behind, heading toward a future of their own making. Logan Reeve stared at the divorce decree one final time, the ink still drying on the glossy paper. Across the mahogany conference table in the King County Courthouse, his wife, once the center of his world, sat with a calm resolve that left his heart sinking. The sunlight through the tall windows painted her features in gentle light, and he tried to memorize every curve of her face, every flicker of emotion in her eyes, as though engraving them into his memory. They had fallen in love on a crisp autumn evening in Discovery Park, trading hopeful vows and imagining futures that now felt impossibly distant. Back then, Logan had believed that combining his tech startup ambitions with Skylar's steadfast support would guarantee success and happiness. Instead, the pressure from his failing company, Everspark Digital Solutions, and the constant tension in the Reeve household had driven them apart. Everspark had started as a dream, a boutique firm making sleek mobile apps for local Seattle businesses. Investors had lined up at its door, and Logan, fresh out of the University of Washington, felt unstoppable. But the tech market shifted faster than he could adapt. Late payments from clients stretched their operating capital dangerously thin. His once enthusiastic team dwindled as engineers and designers left for steadier paychecks elsewhere. Month after month, he drained savings, convincing himself that one more pitch, one more contract, would turn it all around. Skylar had tried to stay hopeful. She reminded Logan of why he'd founded the company in the first place: to innovate, to build something meaningful. She lent him money from her modest savings, assuring him that their newly purchased Capitol Hill home, once a symbol of their bright future, could serve as collateral for a small business loan. Logan had kissed her forehead, promising everything would be fine. But Bianca, his older sister, had seen Skylar's extra cash as Skylar's problem, a sign that Logan's wife was failing him. Bianca's caustic comments, often delivered over breakfast, smeared with burning toast and impatience, eroded Skylar's confidence until Logan's own foundation cracked. When Skylar announced she was leaving the house, Logan heard her suitcase wheels roll down the hallway thicker than his own dread. He had begged her to stay, to let him sort things out. She had nodded, eyes glistening with tears, but her voice had been firm. He watched her drive away in his old hatchback, the same one he'd once slowed to a stop, opened the passenger door and invited her in under the glow of street lamps, hopeful of a future that no longer existed. Divorce proceedings dragged on through gray Seattle winters. Logan's daily routine transformed into a relentless loop of overdraft warnings, client follow-up calls, and lonely hours in a tiny Portland apartment, his parents' offer of refuge. The brownstone in the Rose City felt like an exile, but his father's gentle prodding and his mother's sympathetic presence offered a small comfort. Evening dinners became discussions of business pivots, a freelance gig here, a pitch there. Logan resurrected old ideas, from neighborhood yard sale apps to wellness tracking software. But nothing stuck. Each rejection echoed Skylar's absence. Each missed payment deepened his despair. News traveled fast through Seattle's tight-knit tech scene. Everspark's collapse became LinkedIn fodder. CEO Logan Reeves steps down. Everspark digital files for insolvency. Friends he'd known since college sent condolences that read like polite obituaries. He scrolled through social feeds once filled with triumph, finding only sympathetic emojis and thinly veiled praise for Skylar, who had moved on to her own freelance writing career in Fremont. Some even suggested she was the real talent, the one Logan had underestimated. Then, as Logan retreated further into self-doubt, a chance encounter lit a spark he thought he'd lost. He ducked into a cozy cafe off the East Bank Esplanade to escape cramps of stress. Two new parents at a corner table lamented sleepless nights and a lack of reliable childcare. Their idea, a neighborhood co-op app matching parents for shared babysitting shifts, struck Logan like lightning. By the next afternoon, he had a prototype on his laptop, Copilot Care. He pitched it to the coffee shop parents over cold brew. Their enthusiastic feedback felt like a balm on his battered confidence. Work on Copilot Care gave Logan purpose again. He offered discounted subscriptions to the cafe couple, then improved the interface based on their suggestions. His parents pitched in, spreading the word among their contacts and helping him refine the business model. Margaret, his mother, stern but caring, reminded him to eat and sleep. Richard, his father, offered the quiet encouragement that only a retired naval officer could, teaching Logan to view setbacks as courses to adjust, not signals to abandon ship. Bit by bit, the app gained traction among local mom-and-pop shops and healthcare workers. Logan traded Portland's brownstone for shared workspace in a veterans tech incubator, where he found mentors who saw potential in his pivot. They praised his ambition and molded his pitch deck, guiding him through investor meetings that once would have intimidated him. Copilot Care won a small seed grant, a sum he used to hire a part-time developer and secure basic marketing. All the while, Logan carried a discreet grief for what he'd lost. He kept Skylar's photograph folded in his notebook, a snapshot of her laughing at the Fremont Street Fair, her hand resting on his arm, her eyes alive with hope. He wondered if she'd heard of his new venture, if she'd ever look back and see that he'd transformed failure into renewal. Sometimes, in the quiet hours, he drafted a text. I'm building something I believe in. I hope you're proud. But each time, he erased the words. A year after the divorce, Logan stood in the courtyard of the incubator, watching new parents check in through his app. He felt a quiet pride as notifications pinged on his phone. Babysitters matched, playdates scheduled, community trust slowly building. He'd sold the Capitol Hill house for far less than he'd hoped, but the proceeds had rescued his fledgling company from bankruptcy. He'd rebuilt not just a business, but himself. On the anniversary of his divorce, Logan returned to King County Courthouse, not for heartbreak this time, but for closure. He carried 2 coffee cups to Skylar's new studio in Fremont. She answered the door wearing a paint-splattered apron, surprised but pleased. In her eyes, he saw the same warmth that once bridged their dreams. They sat on her modest sofa, sipped lattes, and talked like old friends. He told her about co-pilot care. She nodded, genuinely interested. She shared her latest article on urban parenting trends. No recriminations. No pressure, just 2 people who had loved deeply and emerged wiser. As Logan left that evening, he handed her a fresh cup. "For all we've been through," he said, voice steady. "And everything to come." Skylar smiled, eyes bright with the promise of new beginnings. "To karma reinvented," she replied. Logan watched her close the door, his heart lighter. The Reeve legacy, once fraught with division, had found a new chapter. One defined not by a house lost or a marriage ended, but by resilience, reinvention, and the quiet thrill of building something meaningful from the wreckage. In the distance, the lights of downtown glowed like embers of possibility, and Logan Reeve, at last, felt ready to keep walking toward them. Seattle's spring was unfolding in soft pastels when Skylar Dean first crossed paths with Avery Brooks, and neither of them could have predicted how profoundly that one moment would alter the course of both their lives. Skylar was juggling more than her share of overdue invoices and looming deadlines. Freelance writing assignments had become her lifeline ever since she left Logan Reeve's family home behind. Her tiny studio apartment in Fremont was cluttered with dog-eared manuscripts, coffee-stained notebooks, and a mountain of self-doubt that had accumulated like forgotten laundry. To clear her head, she'd signed up for a casting call at Cascade Films, a boutique Seattle production house looking for fresh faces in a short promotional video about neighborhood resiliency. She'd arrived 15 minutes early, pulling her blonde hair into a messy knot and tugging at the hem of her favorite brass-button cardigan. The parking lot was half full, and the overcast sky threatened rain. Inside the modest lobby, a handful of hopefuls thumbed through casting forms, their murmurs interspersed with the occasional tap of a screen or the rustle of script pages. Skylar took a seat, reviewed her lines one more time, and tried to steady her racing heart. 15 minutes stretched into 30, and still the assistant director was nowhere in sight. Skylar rose to pace, clipboard in hand, worrying that her lateness might be chalked up to arrogance or unpreparedness. She turned a corner toward the back hallway, praying she hadn't missed her turn, when she nearly collided with a man stepping out of the restroom. He was tall, about 6'2", with dark, wavy hair that fell just above his collar. His olive-toned skin and strong jawline gave him an arresting presence, but what truly captivated Skylar were his eyes. Deep, thoughtful, the color of storm-washed slate. He wore a simple black jacket over a white t-shirt, slim-fit jeans, and a pair of well-worn boots. A 3-day stubble shadowed his cheeks, and a silver guitar pick hung from a chain around his neck. "Oops, sorry," she blurted, bringing her clipboard up to shield herself. "No worries," he replied, voice rich and warm, with a trace of surprise, whether at the near collision or seeing a stranger so quietly poised in the hallway. "You okay?" Skylar nodded, her cheeks flushing. "Yes, I'm fine. I'm just looking for the audition room." He glanced at her clipboard. "You're here for the Cascade shoot?" "I'm Avery Brooks, lead for today's project." "I'm Skylar Dean," she said, offering a shaky hand. "First time at something like this." Avery's grin eased the knot in her chest. "Me too. Well, not the first time at casting, but it's my first corporate promo. I usually do indie films." He tucked his hands into his jacket pockets. "You look ready." "Nervous?" "A bit." She returned his smile. "You?" "About to be. I promised my manager I'd bring my A-game. You know how it is." They walked together to a small room at the end of the corridor. Inside, a pair of cameras, a boom mic, and a folding table with plastic water bottles stood ready. A staffer emerged, clipboard in hand, glancing briefly at both of them. "Avery Brooks?" she called. "That's me," Avery said. He turned to Skylar. "Good luck up there." Skylar offered him a thumbs up. "And to you." The staffer led Avery into the adjoining stage area, and Skylar watched him step under the lights, posture shifting from casual to composed in a practiced instant. He greeted the crew with a nod and a friendly joke about the Seattle drizzle. When it was Skylar's turn 5 minutes later, she realized something profound. Though she was the one auditioning, it was Avery's confidence and gentle kindness that steadied her nerves. Her audition went smoothly. She delivered her lines with an authenticity she hadn't tapped into in months, her own experiences of feeling unwelcome and finding community bleeding into the corporate script about neighborhood support. The casting director's eyebrows lifted in pleasant surprise, and by the time she wrapped up with a bright, "Thank you," Skylar felt a spark reignite inside her. Purpose. Avery emerged minutes later. Now free. He shook Skylar's hand again. "You nailed it." Skylar laughed, relief flooding her. "Right back at you. Nice work with the tech demo." He shrugged. "Just trying not to fumble the drone controls. It's my first time piloting one." They stepped outside for a breath of air. The rails of Lake Union glimmered in the mid-morning light, while houseboats bobbed gently at their moorings. A seaplane roared overhead and banked toward the water. Skylar let the scene soak in. "Want to grab coffee?" Avery gestured toward a cafe across the street. "My treat. Celebration of mutual survival." Skylar paused. In her old life, she would have demurred, suspicious of kindness, protective of boundaries. But something about Avery's inviting grin made that hesitation melt away. "Sure," she said, surprising herself. They settled at a small wrought iron table outside Shoreline Brews, each ordering a latte. Avery's was a classic flat white. Skylar splurged on a lavender honey latte. They talked about the script, the crew, their favorite indie directors, and the Seattle film community's evolution. Avery listened intently when Skylar mentioned her freelance writing career, and he excitedly described his own gigs, doggedly pursuing film roles while playing open-mic gigs at the Crocodile to keep the creative spark alive. "Writing and film, huh?" Avery said, eyes bright. "I've always admired writers. You get to live in so many worlds." Skylar sipped her latte, warmth spreading through her. "Editing scenes for my clients is my version of that. But I've missed being the one in front of the camera." "Maybe this is it," he suggested, nodding toward Cascade Films. "Maybe this audition is exactly the right step." Skylar considered it. A corporate shoot might not satisfy every creative itch, but momentum was everything in their industries. "You're generous to say so," she replied. "I keep thinking I should stick to what I know, writing. But maybe it's time to try new things." A sudden sprinkle of rain sent them scrambling for cover under the cafe awning. Avery offered Skylar his jacket. She declined with a laugh, enjoying the surprise shower. The rain turned heavier, scattering a few other patrons inside. Cascade's cast crew streamed out, searching for umbrellas. They waved at Avery. He waved back, then turned to Skylar. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked. "They need some B-roll shots, and I could use a scene partner." Her heart thudded. Despite everything, her past, her fears, he was asking her to join him again. "Okay," she agreed, smiling broadly. Avery's expression lit up. "Great. I'll pick you up at 10. As they folded their chairs and stepped into the downpour, Skylar felt that familiar tension ease, replaced by a bright anticipation she hadn't allowed herself to feel in months. She fell into step beside Avery, and in the rhythm of their shared umbrella, she realized, sometimes, a single chance encounter could unlock doors she'd long kept closed. By the time they reached the sidewalk, the rain had softened to a drizzle. Avery hailed a rideshare app, and they climbed into a sleek black sedan together. Skylar gazed out the window as Seattle sped by, the monorail gliding past, the space needle winking through the clouds, the ever-present aroma of salt and evergreen in the air. She turned to Avery, her voice soft. "Thank you." He reached across the seat and gave her hand a quick squeeze. "We'll figure this out. Together." Skylar smiled, truly smiled, for the first time in a long while. And in that moment, she knew that whatever came next, she would face it not alone, but side by side with Avery Brooks. Skylar Dean peered at the ultrasound screen in the softly lit exam room of Seattle Grace Hospital, her breath catching as the grainy black and white image resolved into a tiny, flickering heartbeat. She'd barely managed to schedule the appointment between freelance deadlines and her new neighborhood promo side gig, but something in her gut told her it was time. Now, seated beside Dr. Elena Tsai, Skylar felt every ounce of tension in her chest give way to wonder and a dawning wave of emotion she hadn't expected so soon. Dr. Tsai, efficient and warm, tapped her keyboard, measuring the embryo's size against her charts. "Your last menstrual cycle was?" she asked in a gentle tone, one hand steady on the transducer, the other gliding through the chart. "About 12 weeks ago," Skylar answered, voice trembling with excitement. "That sounds right." Dr. Tsai adjusted the image. "And here's our little guest. Your baby's measuring roughly 12 weeks gestational age, with a strong heartbeat of 160 beats per minute." She turned the monitor slightly, as if offering Skylar a private view. "Congratulations, Skylar. You're going to have a baby." Skylar stared at the flickering, tears brimming. Thank you. The sterile whiteness of the room faded. All she saw was that tiny life, a pulsing promise she'd almost left untested. "This little miracle," Dr. Tsai said, smiling, "is healthy so far. However, I do want to talk about your uterine lining. Your endometrial thickness is a bit on the thinner side." Skylar nodded, recalling the early months of her pregnancy when she'd suffered queasy mornings and sharp twinges in her lower abdomen. "Is it going to cause problems?" "Not necessarily," Dr. Tsai reassured her. "Women with thin lining can and do carry healthy pregnancies. We'll monitor you closely, additional ultrasounds at weeks 16 and 20, plus a low-dose progesterone supplement to support the lining. As long as you avoid high-intensity activities and keep up a balanced diet, you should be fine." Balanced diet. Skylar thought of the cardboard dry toast she'd burnt more than once under Bianca Reeves' criticism, of the sleepless nights spent researching pregnancy superfoods while coding scripts for Avery's app. She closed her eyes, savoring the gravity of this moment. That afternoon, brimming with a mix of relief and joy, Skylar stepped out of the hospital doors into a slanting beam of sunshine. Seattle's usual overcast was yielding to blue sky, as though the city itself celebrated. She pulled out her phone and tapped a message to Avery Brooks. "Sky, guess what? We have a heartbeat. Green heart." Within seconds, her phone buzzed. "Avery, that's the best news I've ever heard. Where are you right now?" Skylar's fingers flew over the keys. "Sky, outside. Meet me at Blue Bottle on 9th? I can't wait to see you." She tucked the phone away, heart racing. This was the news she'd been desperate to share. 20 minutes later, Skylar pushed open the door at Blue Bottle Coffee in South Lake Union. The aroma of freshly ground beans rose like a benediction. Avery stood by the counter, a beaming smile on his face and a double-shot latte in hand. He rushed around the bar and embraced her, careful not to jostle her side. "Show me," he said, pulling back but still cradling her hands between his. She handed him her phone. He read the message twice, then looked up at her as though seeing her for the first time. "You're going to be a mother," he whispered. Skylar nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks. "And you're going to be a dad." Avery's grin threatened to split his face. He lifted her hands to his lips, planting a soft kiss on each knuckle as though blessing their new chapter. Around them, the cafe's buzz, steam wands, credit card beeps, quiet chatter, seemed to fade into the background. They sat in a corner booth, the vase of single-stem daffodils between them feeling apt to their mood. Avery ordered a second coffee for Skylar, and they toasted each other in silence before he handed her a napkin. "So," he said, staring into her eyes, "have you thought of names?" Skylar blushed. I was thinking Arlo." Avery's grin went luminous. "Arlo Brookstein. I love it." He reached across, sliding his hand over hers. "Arlo. That's strong and soft at the same time." She laughed through happy tears. I googled moonlight baby names and heartfelt names, and somehow Arlo rose to the top.
I can see why, he said.
One day, I'll play guitar for him under the moonlight. He drummed his fingers lightly on the wooden table. Arlo Brookstein. Sounds like the title of a song. Skylar's heart fluttered. He'll need a lullaby. Then we'll write one together. Their coffees arrived, 2 steaming cups of comfort. They sipped slowly, weaving plans and dreams, nursery colors, soft eucalyptus green. Parenting books to read, Avery swore by the Montessori toddler. Doctor's appointments to schedule. Again, Dr. Tsai insisted on her April follow-up. And weekend walks along Alki Beach once Arlo was old enough to feel the sand. By the time they slid out of Blue Bottle, their arms looped through each other's and their steps in sync. The world felt full of promise. Seattle's skyline gleamed in the afternoon light. Tidewater lapped at distant shores. Skylar paused at the curb, glancing up at the cloud-cut towers. She reached for Avery's hand. We'll need a bigger place soon, somewhere with room for baby things. Avery squeezed her hand. Whatever you need, we'll find it. She leaned into him as rain began to sprinkle, Seattle's way of blessing the new beginning. Under a shared umbrella, they walked toward the future, their laughter mingling with the city's pulse. And inside Skylar's heart, Arlo's small, steadfast heartbeat echoed the greatest gift she'd ever known, the joyful certainty that life, no matter how fragile, carried on, and that the best stories often begin with the tiniest of heartbeats. Skylar woke before dawn, the first pale light seeping through the curtains of her Fremont apartment. She lay still for a moment, savoring the soft rhythm of her own heartbeat and, more tenderly, the fluttering reassurance from within, a tiny reminder that she was not alone. Pulling back the covers, she rose and padded quietly into the kitchen, where Avery was already at the counter, slicing strawberries for today's breakfast smoothie. He glanced up and smiled, brushing flour from his hands. "Morning," he whispered. Skylar rounded the island and slipped her arms around his waist, resting her hands on the curve of her belly. "Good morning," she replied, and for a long moment they stood that way, enveloped by the gentle promise of another day in which they would nurture the life growing between them. Their morning ritual had become sacred. Avadi blended banana, chia seed, and yogurt into a verdant whirl, then spooned the mixture into 2 tall glasses. Skylar sat at the table, marveling at how even the simplest meal now felt like an act of care for their unborn son.
Arlo.
She sipped slowly, noting how the cool sweetness settled her restless stomach. Across from her, Avery studied her with soft eyes. "Feeling okay today?" he asked. She nodded, her hand rising reflexively to her heart. "Better now," she said, offering him half the glass with a grin. After breakfast, Skylar changed into her yoga clothes, a fitted tank and soft leggings that stretched comfortably over her growing bump. Avery slipped on a matching pair of joggers and followed her to the living room. Their prenatal yoga videos from Heart of Seattle studio filled the screen as they settled on their mats. Skylar breathed deeply, guiding herself through gentle stretches that eased her lower back and opened her hips. Avery matched her movements, helping her transition into each pose, his hand on her back for support. In those moments of quiet concentration, neither spoke. They simply moved together, attuned to the ebb and flow of breath and muscle. By the time the final gong sounded, signaling the end of class, both felt calmer, more grounded, as though the swirl of excitement and anxiety that had marked early pregnancy had been washed away. Later that morning, Skylar sipped water thick with cucumber slices while marking items off her nesting checklist. Install car seat base, sterilize bottles, assemble mobile for the crib. Avery tackled each task with his usual meticulousness, unboxing the soft gray rocker and tightening every screw until it felt utterly secure. When Skylar emerged from a brief writing session to find him paused over the last instruction manual page, pencil in hand, she laughed. "I swear if I didn't know better, I'd think you were assembling a space shuttle," she teased. Avery shrugged, eyes twinkling. "This is our space shuttle," he said, tapping his chest. Arlo's liftoff. By lunchtime, they were at Shoreline Brews, where Skylar ordered the lavender honey latte that soothed her nausea and Avery indulged in a savory tuna salad wrap. Between bites, they discussed grocery lists and appointment times. Their calendars were filled with bi-weekly checkups at Dr. Tsai's office. Today was the 20-week anatomy scan and ultrasound technician slots for next month's presentation of Arlo's face in soft grayscale. They arranged for a private sonographer session, a fleeting chance to behold their son's profile without the bustling hospital backdrop. Skylar's pulse quickened at the thought. "I can't wait," she murmured. Avery reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "Neither can I," he replied. Back home, Skylar changed into a breezy dress and prepared for her afternoon writing commitments. She'd built a reputation as a reliable freelance editor, but in recent weeks she'd scaled back assignments to prioritize rest and doctor visits. Today she had 2 short essays to polish. But as soon as she clicked open her laptop, she felt a wave of fatigue wash over her. Avery appeared with a glass of iced ginger tea. "Here," he said, handing it to her. "Ginger soothes everything." She accepted the cup, sighing gratefully.
"Thank you," she said.
He brushed her hair behind her ear and kissed her temple. "Go lie down for 20 minutes, he ordered. "I've got this." She hesitated, then nodded and shuffled off to the bedroom, letting the door close softly behind her. When she awoke, Avery was there, stroking her hair. He'd prepared dinner: seared salmon, roasted sweet potatoes, and a kale salad tossed in olive oil and lemon. He nudged her gently. "Ready to eat something actual?" Skylar smiled tiredly and swung her legs out of bed, padding into the kitchen. The meal tasted like home, warm, nourishing, familiar. With each bite, she felt gratitude for Avery's unwavering support and for the life taking shape inside her. Over the next weeks, minor hurdles tested their resolve. An evening in late May brought unexpected swelling in Skylar's ankles, mild edema, Dr. Tsai had assured them, common in pregnancies. To alleviate it, Skylar elevated her feet on an ottoman while Avery prepared a foot soak infused with Epsom salts. They took turns soaking each foot, massaging gently until the ache eased. Other nights, restless sleep would leave Skylar tossing and turning, seeking a comfortable position that accommodated her curves. Avery rescued her with a U-shaped body pillow, draping it around her so that she could recline with support under her bump and between her knees. The first morning she woke without back pain, she found him still dozing beside her, reaching over to brush her cheek with a smile. By the time the calendar flipped to July, they marked 30 weeks, only 10 to go. Their home had taken on the organized chaos of impending parenthood. The nursery walls were painted a soothing eucalyptus green, the dresser drawers labeled onesies, sleepers, and socks. A mobile of wooden whales hung above the crib, swaying slightly from the breeze of the open window. One evening, as fireflies lit the twilight garden outside, Skylar sat in the glider rocker, Avery at her feet, and they read through parenting books: The Montessori Toddler for Gentle Discipline Tips, Happiest Baby on the Block for Soothing Techniques, and A Well-Thumbed Guide to Breastfeeding. Occasionally, Skylar's breaths hitched with a hiccup from Arlo, and both grinned at each other's astonishment. "There he is again," Skylar whispered. "Our little drummer boy." Avery nodded, eyes soft. Perfect rhythm. When August rolled around, it brought both excitement and impatience. Skylar's belly was a firm globe now, and Arlo's kicks were unmistakably strong. One Sunday afternoon, Avery took his guitar to the living room and began strumming a slow, lilting melody he'd written just for them. Skylar sat cross-legged on the couch, her hands on her bump. As the chords filled the space, her breathing synchronized with the song's gentle sway. She could almost feel Arlo absorbing the music, his hiccups slowing to a comforting pattern. When the final chord faded, Avery reached out, cradled her face, and kissed her forehead. "Arlo's first lullaby," he said softly. Skylar closed her eyes, tears of joy brimming, and whispered, "Thank you." In late September, with just weeks until her scheduled induction, They attended a childbirth education class at Seattle Grace. Surrounded by other expectant couples, they practiced breathing techniques and massage strokes for labor, learning to anchor each other in moments of uncertainty. During a demonstration, Avery held Skylar's hand and guided her in a counter-pressure press to her lower back. When she winced, he murmured encouragement. The exercises were tiring, but they felt like training for their greatest adventure yet. At 37 weeks, Dr. Tsai gave them the green light, provided everything remained stable. They could plan for a 40-week induction or wait for natural labor. Skylar celebrated with a day trip to Alki Beach, her parents joining them in sun hats and sandals. She perched on a driftwood log, toes in the sand, Avery beside her, and recited favorite childhood poems to Arlo. The ocean's gentle hush was a lullaby in itself. Her mother knelt to lengthen her dress hem, smoothing stray sand. "Just a few more weeks," her mother said, voice thick with sentiment. Skylar nodded, glancing at Avery. "I won't let him come until you're ready," she promised Arlo, hand on her heart. That night, they returned home to finalize their hospital bag. Avery packed clothes for Skylar, toiletries for himself, and a camera for photos. Skylar tucked in her maternity notes, a copy of Dr. Tsai's contact sheet, and a soft baby blanket. As they zipped up the bag, reality settled over them like a warm blanket. Tomorrow, or any day now, would bring their son into the world. In the early hours of October 10th, Skylar woke to a fierce contraction that took her breath away. Avery, jolted from sleep, guided her to the living room couch, timing the rhythm. 20 minutes later, they called Dr. Tsai's on-call line and headed to the hospital, hearts pounding with anticipation. Under the glow of hallway lights, Avery steadied Skylar's hand as they navigated the familiar corridors. Each step brought them closer to the moment they'd both been awaiting for months, a culmination of careful planning, mindful self-care, and unwavering support. In the labor suite, Skylar breathed through each surge of pain, Avery whispering affirmations as he pressed steady counterpressure to her lower back. Nurses checked vital signs. Dr. Tsai arrived with a calm assurance that anchored everyone in purpose. After hours of labor, Skylar's final push heralded the arrival of a new life. A gentle cry filled the room, and Avery burst into tears as the nurse placed a squirming, pink-skinned baby boy on Skylar's chest. He had a shock of dark hair, perfect little fingers, and eyes that fluttered open just enough to see his parents' overwhelmed faces. Skylar gasped through tears of joy. "Arlo," she whispered. Avery's arms closed around them both, the three of them swaying in the afterglow of creation. Their months of morning smoothies, yoga sessions, career juggling, and nursery prep had led to this singular miracle, a living testament to hope, resilience, and love. In that moment, they knew the journey ahead would be demanding, unpredictable, and wondrous beyond words. But as Avery kissed Skylar's temple and Arlo nestled into her heartbeat, they understood deeply that every sacrifice, every tender ritual, had prepared them for this dawning of family life. And together, they stepped into parenthood, hearts entwined, ready to nurture the greatest gift they could ever hope to receive. Skylar awoke in the dim, pre-dawn hush with a sudden, shocking warmth spreading between her legs. She bolted upright in bed as a trickle became a steady stream. Her heart pounded with disbelief. "Avery," she called, her voice trembling. He was beside her in an instant, alarmed awake. Within seconds, they understood. Her water had broken. At 38 weeks plus 2 days, a whisker shy of full term, this was no gentle pre-labor warning. Avery dashed for clean towels, while Skylar sat on the side of the bed, breathing through the first tremor of panic that rippled through her. The quiet confidence that had carried them through prenatal yoga and nesting rituals dissolved in a heartbeat. Avery cradled her elbow. "Okay, Sky," he said softly, voice taut with concern but steeled with resolve. "I've got you." He called Dr. Tsai's on-call line. The doctor's calm voice over the phone guided them to pack last-minute items: hospital bag, car seat, phone charger, Avery's guitar pick pendant, Skylar's anchor of reassurance. Each item they gathered felt surreal, as though they were actors thrust into a role unbidden. Within 20 minutes they were in the back seat of a rideshare, Avery's arm across Skylar's shoulders as the city lights blurred past. The app's driver navigated the quiet streets towards Seattle Grace Women and Infants Hospital, where they'd prepared for precisely this scenario. In Skylar's mind, a scoreboard ticked, membranes ruptured, week 38. Too early for the ideal, but late enough that baby Arlo stood a strong chance in the neonatal unit. They would need to move fast. At admissions, a nurse whisked them through a priority lane. Skylar changed into a hospital gown as Avery held her hand, brushing stray hairs behind her ear. The antiseptic smell of the labor wing assaulted her senses, even as she felt a fierce calm settle over her core. Every lesson from childbirth class, timing contractions, breathing, trusting her body, blended into one clear moment of purpose. Bring Arlo safely into the world. Monitors were attached. A fetal heart rate strip spooled across paper. 140 beats per minute, strong, steady. Uterine activity registered, only a few mild contractions, betraying the oddity of a premature rupture without labor pains. Skylar pressed a hand to her lower belly. She felt nothing more than the gentle kicking that had comforted her all pregnancy.
Dr.
Sai arrived, her surgical mask folded down for a moment so her reassuring smile could reach Skylar's eyes. "We'll move her to labor and delivery," she told the nurses. "Then we'll discuss induction versus expected management. I want to reduce infection risk before Arlo arrives." Within the hour, Skylar lay on a narrow operating table behind a sterile blue curtain, feet in stirrups. Avery sat nearby, clutching her hand. He whispered, "I'm right here," over and over, pressing a damp cloth to her forehead. Dr. Tsai explained, because the fluid had drained early. They needed to induce labor within 12 hours or risk chorioamnionitis, a dangerous infection. At 38 weeks, Arlo's lungs were likely mature, but a dose of corticosteroids and an antibiotic infusion would turbocharge his lung development and guard against infection. Skylar nodded, swallowing a tight knot of fear. A steady drip of Pitocin began to stimulate her uterus. The first contraction was barely noticeable. She breathed easily through it. Avery squeezed her hand. "You're doing great," he murmured. The second contraction was sharper, a wave of pressure that dipped into her back. "Breathe," he coached, and she exhaled in a low hum. As the hours passed, contractions intensified. Skylar squeezed Avery's hand for dear life during each surge. He reminded her of her breathing count, stroked her cheek with unflinching devotion, and pressed a cool cloth to her temple. She chanted through her contractions, eyes closed, picturing the warm glow of the nursery lamps, the soft fleece of the woodland mobile whales circling above Arlo's crib. At 2:43 a.m., the midwife, Ruby, warm and experienced, applied a fetal scalp electrode to monitor Arlo's heartbeat precisely. "He's with us," she said softly. "Strong baseline, good variability." In that moment, Skylar felt a swell of gratitude that, even in the chaos, they were never alone. By 4:15 a.m., the contractions were rhythmic and unrelenting. Skylar had progressed to 6 centimeters of dilation. The midwife confirmed. Dr. Tsai, scrubs immaculate, stepped in to examine her. "You're doing so well," she said. "If we keep this pace, we should be ready to push in another 2 hours." Anxiety clawed at Skylar's chest. She shook her head. "It hurts too much," she whispered. But Avery, unwavering, leaned close. "You've got this," he promised. "Just like you did in yoga, one breath at a time." Pain eclipsed everything. Skylar clung to Avery's hand, as though it were a lifeline. He guided her to visualize each contraction melting away, each exhale releasing the fear that threatened to engulf her. At 6:02 a.m., she reached 10 centimeters, complete dilation. Ruby's voice was gentle but firm. "Next contraction, give me 3 deep pushes." Skylar breathed down her anxiety and put her all into those pushes, feeling a fierce surge of primal strength. Avery knelt between her legs, his forehead resting against her thigh. Hands clutching hers, Together they counted through each push. 1, 2, 3. The second contraction brought a fresh wave of pain, but Skylar summoned every ounce of resolve. On the third push, Ruby coached, "I see the head, Skylar. Just a few more pushes." At 6:25 a.m., the world shifted. A whoosh of new air filled the room as Arlo was born, his cries slicing through the sterile hush. The nurse caught him and placed him on Skylar's chest. He was perfect, pink, wrinkled, slight tremors running over his tiny shoulders as he adjusted to breathing. Avery blinked back tears, wrapping an arm around Skylar as she cradled their son. Arlo's heartbeat, loud and undeniable, reverberated through Skylar's skin. She touched his downy hair, smiling through tears of relief. The trials of a premature rupture, those agonizing hours of induction, the fear of infection, the pain, fell away in an instant as she and Avery gazed at the living embodiment of their love.
Dr.
Sai peered around the curtain. "Congratulations," she said. "He's 6 pounds 2 ounces. Strong for 38 weeks. Skylar's lungs burned with emotion, and Avery pressed a gentle kiss to her temple. "You did it," he whispered. "We did it." The rest of the morning blurred. Stitches for Skylar, measurements for Arlo, and careful checks from the neonatal nurse before he settled into a swaddled bundle in Skylar's arms. Avery announced the news to their parents by phone, his voice a quivering mixture of joy and exhaustion. Skylar spoke softly to her father, tears in her eyes as she told him, "He's here. Arlo's here." By noon, Skylar and Avery held their son skin to skin, their hospital suite awash in sunlight. Arlo sniffed at the air, clustered between them like a perfect miracle. His tiny fists flexed reflexively, and he nuzzled Skylar's collarbone, seeking comfort in her heartbeat. In that sacred space, sterile curtains surrounding them, monitors humming, their journey reached its triumphant summit. The rupture, the fear, the pain, every step had led here. Now, with Arlo nestled between them, Skylar and Avery understood that parenthood would forever be woven through both challenge and grace. Together, they would face sleepless nights, growth spurts, and the endless wonder of watching their son learn to laugh. But in this moment, his first breath, her first breastfeed, their first shared glance as a family of 3, nothing existed beyond the undeniable truth of his arrival. Arlo's soft cry echoed in their hearts, a vow that even when life broke open unexpectedly, the love they carried would always carry them forward. The afternoon sun filtered through the blinds of the private room at Seattle Grace, illuminating the quiet hum of monitors and the soft rustle of hospital linens. Skylar Dean sat vigil beside Avery Brooks's bedside, her hand resting gently on his motionless arm. Since their son Arlo's arrival 6 weeks ago, life had felt full of promise, but today, an unrelenting anxiety pulsed through her every heartbeat. Avery's chest rose and fell only with the help of a ventilator, and beyond the curtain, the world continued its pace, while time inside this room had ground nearly to a halt. It had happened so suddenly. Just 2 mornings ago, Avery had insisted on joining the film crew's early call time to oversee the location scout. He believed in staying close to his art even as he embraced fatherhood. Skylar, on strict postpartum orders, had stayed home with Arlo, whom she settled in his car seat before drifting back to sleep. When the hospital called her in mid-morning, her world fractured. A scaffolding beam had slipped on set, striking Avery on the head before he could dive clear. He'd been rushed by ambulance to the trauma unit, intubated, sedated, and declared in a medically induced coma to reduce swelling around his injured brain. Skylar swallowed the lump in her throat as she recalled Dr. Tsai's grave expression. "He's stable for now," the doctor had said gently, "but the next 72 hours are critical. The brain can compensate, but it can also react unpredictably to swelling." "I'm sorry, Skylar. We're doing everything we can." Since then, Skylar had moved into a nearby apartment, exchanging her own face for Avery's in every waking thought. She visited him daily, maintaining a vigil of whispered encouragement and soft music, jazz reimagined by Tom York, his favorite, and gentle acoustic ballads she hoped might find their way through the haze. Nurses assisted her in washing Avery's hands and combing his hair. She cleaned his glasses, set aside in a small dish, as if they held his very essence. Though Avery couldn't squeeze her hand in return, she felt his presence in the faint warmth that clung to his skin. Today, as she settled into the stiff chair, she caught sight of the small digital clock, 3:17 p.m. Visiting hours in the neurological intensive care unit would end soon. Skylar knelt beside the bed, pressing her forehead gently to his. "Avery," she murmured, voice cracking. "It's me, Skylar. I'm right here. Arlo's growing every day. He just said his first reel, Mama, last night. You should have seen his grin." She paused, blinking back tears. "He misses you. I miss you. We need you back here with us." She trailed her fingers along the ridge of his jaw, retracing the lines she knew by heart. "You're the strongest man I know. I believe in you." Early on, Skylar had learned that his resilience ran deeper than she'd ever imagined. Avery had faced setbacks before: a torn rotator cuff that nearly ended his surfing hobby, the disappointment of a failed pilot that was never picked up, but he'd always rebounded with determination. In college, bruised by rejection letters and lackluster auditions, he'd doubled down on his craft, practicing monologues before dawn and honing his sight reading on piano keys. His spirit, she knew, was unbreakable. Now it was time for that spirit to guide him back to her and to Arlo. The rhythmic beeping of the cardiac monitor was her only answer. She closed her eyes, inhaling the faint antiseptic scent and Avery's familiar cologne still lingering in the sheets. The world beyond the door, jobs, deadlines, the bustling traffic of life, seemed to fade to silence. Here, she realized, everything centered on the fragile miracle of recovery. Nurse Carter entered quietly to adjust Avery's foreline. She offered Skylar a sympathetic nod, as much a reassurance as any words. "We're keeping a close eye on his intracranial pressure," she whispered. "The next scan is scheduled for tomorrow morning. I'll let you know if there's any change." She placed a gentle hand on Skylar's shoulder before slipping away. Left alone again, Skylar reached for her phone and opened the gallery of pictures she'd taken of Avery and Arlo before the accident. Avery lifting their son in the air, both of them laughing under the backyard maple. Avery reading "Goodnight Moon" in his gravelly yet tender voice. Avery kissing Skylar's belly when she first glimpsed Arlo's heartbeat on the ultrasound. Each image was a lifeline, a tether to the life she refused to lose. Her thumb hovered over Avery's contact tile. She typed and deleted messages countless times before finally settling on, "I love you. Fight for us." Then she pressed send, comforting herself with the hope that somehow her words would find him. The fluorescent lights flickered at the edge of her vision, coaxing tears again. She recognized the depth of her own fear. Losing Avery was an outcome she couldn't, would not accept. So she prayed, not for a miracle, but for the clarity of his own unyielding will. For the tiny synapses in his brain to rewire. For the swelling to recede. For his eyes to open again and find her there, waiting. Night fell in the hospital wing. The ambient glow of monitors cast pools of blue light across the bed. Skylar curled into the chair, folding in on herself like paper, and drifted into a fitful half-sleep where she dreamed of arcing green waves and Avery's arms cradling her like a final refuge. She woke to the first hint of dawn, a guard of nurses changing shifts. She rose, brushing a fingertip against Avery's palm. "I'll see you tonight," she whispered, as though sealing a promise. Over the next 2 days, each visit became a battle between dread and hope. Avery's condition wavered. A slight spike in pressure, a successful CT scan showing reduced edema, another night of restless ventilator adjustments. Skylar scribbled notes on a yellow legal pad, milestones of progress, however small. 1% drop in ICP, stable heart rate, responsive grimace to suction. With each notation, she let herself breathe just a little easier. On the third morning, the world shifted once more. Dr. Tsai beckoned her into the consultation room, her expression unreadable. Skylar sat, hands still trembling around her coffee cup. "We're seeing encouraging signs," Dr. Tsai began. "The swelling has reduced significantly. His EEG shows increased alpha waves, suggesting returning consciousness. We're tapering his sedation. In a few hours, we'll lower the ventilator support and see if he can breathe on his own. If he follows the protocol, we may try a wake-up trial later today." Skylar felt lightheaded, her heart racing with cautious exhilaration. He could wake up, she managed, voice thick. "Potentially," Dr. Tsai said. "There are no guarantees, but he's a strong young man, and you've been an unwavering advocate." Tears welled, but Skylar smiled, a shaky, radiant smile. "Thank you," she whispered, as though the weight of those words carried the entirety of her soul. Back in the room, Skylar perched on the edge of the bed as Avery lay surrounded by wires and tubes. A nebulizer mask had replaced the ventilators. She cradled his hand, her eyes never leaving his pale, still face. Hands from the nursing staff came and went, lowering medication drips, adjusting equipment. Then, as the sedative was gradually withdrawn, Avery's eyelids fluttered. Skylar held her breath as the linen stirred with a light exhalation. His eyelids lifted slowly, revealing a gaze clouded with confusion and pain. He blinked twice, then focused on her face. His grip tightened around her fingers, a weak but unmistakable sign. "Skylar?" His voice was raw, a rasp that echoed through Skylar's chest like a song long forgotten. Tears streaked down her cheeks as she leaned in. "Avery," she whispered back, smoothing his hair. "You're awake. You're back." She pressed his hand to her cheek. "Oh my God, you're back." Avery's forehead creased as memory seeped through the fog. He blinked, drawing in a ragged breath. "Arlo," he croaked, eyes widening with the recollection of fatherhood and the empty arms he'd feared would never cradle their son again. "Arlo." Skylar nodded, tears falling freely now. Yes. He's right at home. He's been asking for you." She brushed a tear from his cheek. "Rest now. You're safe." As nurses monitored his vitals and Dr. Tsai entered to confirm his stable response, Skylar called for her mother to fetch Arlo. Moments later, her mother returned, holding their son, now a lively 6-week-old with big, curious eyes and a tuft of dark hair. Skylar lifted him gently and tucked him against Avery's chest. Arlo's tiny fingers curled around a collar of Avery's gown. His soft coos and squeals punctuated the beeps and hums of the room. Avery's eyes, once clouded by injury, twinkled with wonder. He cradled Arlo's cheek, planting a feather-light kiss on his forehead. "Hey, little man," he murmured, voice thick with emotion. "I'm here." Round after round, Avery's strength returned in increments. His grip grew firmer, his clarity brighter. By the 4th day, he was sitting up in bed, recounting to Skylar the hazy fragments of his memory, brief glimpses of flashing lights, muffled voices, then the enduring face of the woman he loved. He wept as he recounted how he'd imagined her beside him every moment, tethering him to life. With each passing hour, Avery's will shone more brightly than any brace or ventilator ever could. He mastered breathing on his own, passed speech exercises, and eventually sat in a wheelchair, gazing at Skylar and Arlo through tears and a shy, triumphant grin. The unimaginable had become their reality. Avery had emerged from the coma, guided by an ironclad spirit. On a crisp Friday morning, Dr. Tsai discharged Avery with a brief course of physical therapy and an array of follow-up appointments. Outside the hospital, Skyliner light rail hummed in the distance. Skylar slipped her hand into Avery's as they wheeled Arlo between them. The air tasted of promise and possibility. They paused at a bench overlooking Lake Union's gentle swells. Skylar leaned into Avery's shoulder, Arlo cradled in her arms. Avery traced circles on her palm. "You brought me back," he whispered. "I fought because I had to fight for you for Arlo." Skylar turned, eyes bright with unshed tears. "We fought together," she replied. "Love was stronger than any accident or injury." She kissed his cheek. "Welcome home." Together, they watched dawn break across the water, its colors reflecting the journey they'd endured, from joy to crisis, from fear to unwavering hope. As the light spread, so too did the promise of every tomorrow, to grow, to heal, to love more fiercely than ever before. In that shared silence, they knew that Avery's unbreakable will had brought them back to this moment. A family forever bound by resilience, devotion, and the unassailable power of hope. Skylar's water broke just after midnight, a sudden warm rush that startled her awake and sent her heart pounding. Avery's arms were around her in an instant, steady and strong, as though he could catch every drop. Their small Fremont apartment blurred past in a swirl of midnight streetlights and frantic preparations while Avery cradled her elbow and reassured her that everything would be okay. The same calm confidence that had carried them through prenatal yoga and countless doctor's appointments now focused all its power on one singular mission, bringing their son safely into the world. In the hushed corridors of Seattle Grace, a nurse led them swiftly to a private labor and delivery room. The monitors clicked and beeped, the sterile scent of antiseptic lingering in the air. And Skylar, now clad in a hospital gown, lay back on the bed with Avery at her side. She clutched his hand as the first wave of contractions rolled through her, fierce yet familiar. Each surge of pain was cushioned by Avery's whispered encouragements. "You're doing this. One breath at a time." They moved together through the early hours, Skylar breathing in unison with a Pitocin drip, Avery counting each inhale and exhale, his thumbs gently massaging her palms. The rhythm of her contractions accelerated, and nurses streamed in to adjust monitors and offer cool cloths. With each passing minute, Skylar felt Arlo's presence grow stronger, a persistent beat against her ribs, as though her son were reminding her of his readiness to enter their world. By dawn, Skylar was fully dilated. Dr. Tsai, her ever-reassuring guide, entered and gave the signal. Skylar's eyes locked on Avery's as she summoned her strength. With every contraction, she pushed, and Avery, knelt between her knees, stroked her hair, whispered her courage. 2 hours of determined effort brought a new life inching toward the light. Blood pounded in Skylar's ears, but amid the haze of pain and effort, she heard the midwife's breathless call. "Head is out." One more push. On the third push, a sudden rush of relief, and then the room filled with the clear, piercing cry of their son. Time stopped. Avery's face crumpled in tears of joy as the nurse lifted a slick, pink bundle into the world. Skylar felt her own tears spill as the nurse placed Arlo on her chest. He was perfect. 6 pounds, 3 ounces of wriggling life, dark hair damp with amniotic fluid, eyes fluttering as though waking from a dream. Skylar and Avery exchanged a stunned glance, hearts swelling with wonder. Avery brushed a tear from Skylar's cheek before leaning over to touch Arlo's cheek with a trembling kiss. "Hey, little man," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "Welcome to us." Arlo's cry softened into a series of contented whimpers as Skylar wrapped him in her arms, the world beyond the labor room receding into insignificance. In that moment, every fear of premature rupture, every pang of anxiety about his early arrival, melted away. All that mattered was this: their son had arrived, strong and resilient. Within moments, Dr. Tsai congratulated them and checked Arlo's vitals. His breathing was strong, color perfect, reflexes sharp. A nurse carefully transferred him to a warming station for the initial tests, while Skylar, exhausted but exhilarated, gazed at her son's tiny form under the gentle glow of the heat lamp. Avery hovered, utterly entranced, snapping photos on his phone to capture each precious detail. The curve of Arlo's ear, the shape of his button nose, the way his little limbs twitched as if exploring his newfound freedom. Their room became a sanctuary. Soft blankets swaddled Arlo. A cardamom-scented diffuser infused the air with calming warmth, and the hum of monitors underscored the miracle before them. Skylar closed her eyes, drinking in the moment, a symphony of firsts. Her first skin-to-skin contact, his first breath, their first whispered pledges of love. She felt Avery's hand on her shoulder and opened her eyes to see his radiant smile. He leaned in and kissed her temple. "We did it," he murmured. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of visitors and congratulations. Skylar's parents arrived, bursting into tears as they beheld their grandson for the first time. They lingered over Arlo's crib, marveling at his perfect fingers and toes, while Skylar and Avery traded wordless looks of astonishment and pride. Nurses guided Skylar through her first feeding. Avery watched with rapt attention as Arlo latched on, instinctively seeking nourishment, tiny jaw moving in gentle rhythm. Skylar felt a rush of awe. Her body, which had felt so foreign and changed, was now fulfilling its most ancient purpose. By afternoon, the neonate unit team gave their approval. Arlo was healthy enough to room in with his parents. The staff wheeled in a sleek little bassinet on wheels, and Avery carefully transferred Arlo from the warming station into his new bed, tucking the swaddled baby gently under a soft quilt. Skylar reached in to smooth back the baby blanket, her last roll full circle, from carrying Arlo in her womb to caring for him in her arms. That evening, the young family gathered for a modest celebration. Avery's guitar softly strummed a lullaby in the corner. Skylar's mother brought fresh roasted chicken soup to nourish her daughter's recovery, and Skylar's father read aloud from beloved childhood stories. Arlo's hazy eyes fluttered open occasionally, glancing between his parents with the curiosity of a newborn discovering the world. Each flicker of recognition sparked warmth and hope in their hearts. In the quiet hours before midnight, Skylar lay in bed, Arlo cradled against her chest, Avery beside her, one arm draped protectively over both of them. The city lights of Seattle twinkled through the window, an orchestra of possibility, reflecting the beating of their own hearts. Together, they watched Arlo yawn and stretch, the first signs of his transition from life in the womb to life in their arms. "Tonight," Avery whispered, "we start a new adventure." He pressed a gentle kiss to Skylar's forehead. "And he's our greatest one yet." Skylar nodded, tears of joy glinting in her eyes. She murmured back to Avery, "He's ours, and he's already worth every sleepless night, every fear, every triumph." She lowered her gaze to Arlo, whose breathing had settled into steady, contented rhythm. "Welcome to us, little Arlo." In the days that followed, as Arlo's tiny coos filled the nursery and Avery mastered fatherhood with gentle patience, Skylar felt the victory of new life ripple through every fiber of her being. His arrival wasn't just the culmination of pregnancy, it was the rebirth of hope itself. Each day offered fresh discoveries: the curve of his first smile, the soft rustle of a swaddled blanket, the way he searched for her voice. They learned together what it meant to live beyond themselves. Avery changed diapers with reverent care, singing softly when Arlo fussed. Skylar felt the delight of a peaceful nursing session, gazing at her son's trusting eyes. In these small miracles, they found redemption from every trial of the past months: the rupture, the induction, the whirlwind of medical interventions. As Seattle's autumn chill crept into October, they bundled Arlo in a cozy navy cap and blanket and strolled along the Burke-Gilman Trail, letting the crisp air brush against their cheeks. Avery held Arlo close, pointing out the brilliant reds and golds of the falling leaves, while Skylar rested her head on Avery's shoulder, feeling the solid strength of his presence. No one could have predicted the frailty of membranes or the sudden rupture of night waters. But in Arlo's perfect cry, in the resilient spark of life shining in his eyes, Skylar and Avery saw affirmation beyond measure that love, courage, and hope can triumph over any uncertainty. And so, with their son at the world's threshold, they stepped forward together, parents bound by devotion and wonder, ready to nurture this new life and in turn be reborn themselves into the richest, sweetest chapter imaginable. A hush fell over the room when Avery's eyelids fluttered open. The soft morning light filtered through the blinds, casting gold stripes across the white hospital sheets. Skylar, who had dozed in the recliner chair beside him, startled awake. Her heart flipped into overdrive as she rushed to Avery's side, brushing hair from his forehead. "Avery?
Can you hear me?"
She whispered, voice trembling. He blinked slowly, the hazel depths of his eyes clearing from the fog. Recognition snapped between them like a spark. He faintly smiled, and his hand, strange and thin against hers, closed weakly around Skylar's fingers. "Sky," he croaked, voice gravelly after days of intubation and sedation. Tears welled in Skylar's eyes as she pressed his hand to her cheek. "You're awake," she said, her voice cracking with relief. "You're really awake." She sat on the edge of the bed, arms trembling but determined to support him. She had waited 5 endless days for this moment. 5 days of whispered encouragement, of reading stories through tear-blurred eyes, of singing lullabies and urging Avery to come back to them. And now, here he was, blinking into a new dawn. In the minutes that followed, the room came alive. Nurses bustled in to adjust monitors, smiling as they saw Avery's steady vitals and the light returning to his gaze. Dr. Tsai swept in, her professional composure softening into genuine joy. "Welcome back, Avery," she said, offering a fist bump. "We've been waiting for you." Avery's gaze flicked to Skylar, the lines of pain etched on his face melting in that moment of reconnection. "Skylar," he whispered again, voice stronger now. How are you?" She squeezed his hand. "I've been okay, but I was scared," she admitted, tears spilling freely. "Arlo misses you. We both do." Hearing his son's name sparked a new surge of emotion in Avery. He shifted slightly, wincing as muscles and used to motion protested. Skylar and Dr. Tsai helped him sit up, propping pillows behind his back. In the doorway, Avery's mother and father stood, their eyes red but shining with relief. "Dad, Mom," Avery croaked, voice small but clear. "I'm sorry I made you worry." His father hurried forward, grasping his son's other hand. "No, son, you gave us more reason to hope. We never stopped believing you'd come back." He paused, glancing at Skylar. "And thank you for being his anchor." Avery's mother moved to Skylar, wrapping her arms around her. "You were so brave," she whispered. "You kept him alive with your love." Skylar let the comfort wash over her, but her mind raced with one thought. "Arlo. Can we see him?" she asked, glancing at Avery's longing expression. Dr. Tsai checked his chart. "Once he's a bit more stable and off the ventilator entirely, we can arrange for father-son skin-to-skin," she explained. "He's in the nursery. We'll take you down in a wheelchair soon." At the promise of seeing their son, Avery's face brightened, and he nodded. Nurses began disconnecting the ventilator tube, substituting oxygen support via nasal cannula. Avery inhaled shakily, then exhaled, his lungs reawakening to their independent rhythm. Skylar kissed his temple as his chest rose and fell with each breath. "See," she murmured, "you're breathing on your own." By midday, Avery was cleared for transfer to the postpartum suite with Skylar. Floored by joy, Skylar wheeled him to the nursery, where Arlo lay swaddled in a pale blue blanket under gentle lighting. The baby stirred, eyes fluttering open as though sensing his father's presence. Avery's breath caught as he saw his son, tiny fingers flexing, legs kicking, soft coos echoing in the quiet room. "There he is," Avery whispered, voice choked with emotion. "My boy." Skylar scooped Arlo into her arms and brought him to Avery's chest. It was a moment of pure alchemy, the fragile thread of life connecting father to son, the first intimate exchange of warmth and heartbeat. Arlo's eyes fixed on Avery's face, and a small grin curved the baby's lips as though recognizing the bond. Avery's hand trembled as he traced Arlo's cheek. "Hey, buddy," he said softly. "Daddy's here." Tears spilled down Skylar's cheeks as she watched husband and son unite in that sacred instant. The trauma of the past week, the accident, the coma, the fear, receded into the background. All that mattered was this fragile, perfect life nestled against Avery's heart. Over the next hours, Avery's strength returned in leaps and bounds. He held Arlo, supporting the baby's head with tenderness, rocking him gently as Skylar guided his breath through cooing lullabies. Their tiny family, once fractured by crisis, now pulsed with renewed hope. In the quieter moments, Avery and Skylar talked through everything that had happened. She described Arlo's first smiles, the way he grasped a finger with unexpected force, the lullabies she sang at 3 a.m. when doubt hung heavy. Avery absorbed every detail, nodding slowly, memorizing their son's early life as though imprinting it on his soul. Outside the hospital room, the world churned on. Colleagues sent well wishes, film crews adjusted schedules, calendars filled with future shoots. But inside, time stretched luxuriously, giving them space to revel in reunion. Avery's first steps were cautious and braced by Skylar's steady hand, but he reveled in the smallest triumphs, sitting upright, walking to the window to breathe fresh air, feeding Arlo a bottle of pumped breast milk for the first time. By day 3, Dr. Sy declared him fit for discharge. The final morning in the hospital, Avery dressed himself in comfortable clothes, jeans and a button-down shirt, while Skylar held Arlo in a custom car seat. Nurses smiled at the transformation from comatose patient to proud father on the brink of returning home. As they wheeled Avery and Arlo out to the valet, the autumn air of Seattle greeted them with crisp promise. Leaves rustled along the sidewalk, a reminder that seasons change and life keeps turning forward. Skylar slipped her arm through Avery's and they paused on the steps of the hospital. Arlo cooed in her arms, the very picture of new life. Avery closed his eyes and inhaled the scent of Skylar's hair, the faint fragrance of Arlo's baby lotion, the tang of autumn air. "We have a second chance," he whispered. "A new beginning." Skylar smiled up at him, tears still lingering in her eyes. "Yes," she agreed. "And we'll face it together, every challenge, every joy. As a family." They climbed into the car, Avery in the front passenger seat, Skylar taking the wheel with Arlo cradled safely beside her. The engine purred to life, and they turned onto the boulevard leading home. In the back seat, Arlo kicked his legs, as though celebrating freedom from the nursery. In the front, Avery reached over for Skylar's hand, entwining fingers. The city unfolded before them. The Space Needle in the distance, the ferries gliding across Elliott Bay, neighborhood cafes beginning their morning rush. But their journey had taught them that home wasn't a place, it was a shared heartbeat, a promise held between Skylar, Avery, and their son. They passed the park where Skylar had gone into labor, and Avery let himself laugh softly at the memory of Skylar's sudden urgency. She looked forward, smiling at him. "We made it," she said. He nodded. "We did." And for the first time in days, neither fear nor pain clouded their future. Instead, a radiant hope glimmered on the horizon, promising countless dawns and giggles, scraped knees and bedtime stories. Because they had emerged from the darkest moments of uncertainty into the wonder of new life, and together, they would write the rest of their story. On the curb outside their apartment, Avery lifted Arlo into his arms and held him against his chest. The baby gurgled happily, gazing up at his father with wide, curious eyes. Skylar slipped from the driver's seat and joined them, resting her head on Avery's shoulder. They formed a small, triumphant circle, 3 souls bound by resilience and unbreakable love. As the elevator doors closed on them, the next chapter of their lives began. Late-night lullabies, first words, first steps, and the countless miracles hidden in ordinary moments. Together, they would embrace every sunrise and every sunset, confident that no trial could eclipse the brightness of hope and the power of a family reborn. And that brings us to the end of today's story on Truistory Vibes. Don't forget to leave a comment with a quote or moment that touched you the most. Your words give our team the motivation to keep creating more heartfelt stories. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again soon.